I'll never forget the moment Elizabeth Harper, or Liz, as we whisper behind her back, was led to a police cruiser parked right in front of my house. Her face, flushed as red as her meticulously styled pixie cut, twisted with fury as she yelled about upholding neighborhood standards and how we'd all pay for this. The officers stayed calm, guiding her firmly into the back seat while my neighbors stood frozen on their pristine lawns, jaws dropped. I was on my porch, arm around my best friend Jake, who sat in his wheelchair next to me. My heart was racing, but for the first time in months, it wasn't from dread. It was from a rush of relief. Justice was finally here. 6 months earlier, I'd been over the moon to buy my first home in Willow Creek, a picture-perfect neighborhood with tree-lined streets and charming houses. Sure, there was a homeowners association, but I thought it was a small price to pay for the community pool and the promise that nobody would paint their house hot pink or let their yard go wild. What I didn't know was that the HOA was less a community group and more a one-woman dictatorship, with Liz Harper as its queen. She'd ruled the board for over a decade, wielding the bylaws like a personal weapon. Most folks just kept their heads down to avoid her, but I landed in her sights the first time Jake came over. Jake and I had been tight since college. He lost the use of his legs in a car crash our sophomore year, but it never stopped him from living life full throttle. That is, until Liz decided he didn't belong in Willow Creek. The first time she saw him, she stormed up my driveway as I was helping him out of his car. "Excuse me," she said, her smile so fake it could have been plastic. "I don't think we've met your guest." The way she said guest made it sound like I was hiding a criminal. I introduced Jake, saying he was a buddy stopping by for dinner. Liz nodded, her eyes locked on his wheelchair. "You know, we have strict guest policies here for insurance reasons," she said, thrusting a highlighted HOA newsletter into my hands before strutting off, her heels clicking like a ticking bomb. Jake and I laughed it off that night, but it was only the start. A week later, when Jake came back, Liz appeared like she'd been staking out my house. "I see your friend is here again," she said, her smile tighter than a drum. "Did you register him as a recurring VY siter with the HOA?" I hadn't, because no such rule existed. I'd double-checked the bylaws after her first VY sit. When I told her that, her smile vanished. "Well, there should be. And that ramp on your steps? It's not approved. You need to file a modification request." The ramp was just a portable rubber one I set out for Jake's VY sits, not some permanent fixture. "It's temporary," I said, keeping my cool. "It doesn't change the property." Liz's eyes narrowed. "Everything here requires approval. Everything." She snapped a photo of my front door with her phone and marched off. 3 days later, a warning notice was taped to my door, accusing me of violating HOA rules with unapproved exterior modifications and excessive guest VY citation. I had 7 days to fix it or face a due Law 100 fine. I was leave VYD, but stayed calm, knowing Liz was out of line. I took photos of the notice and sent a polite email to the entire HOA board, explaining that the ramp was temporary and necessary for Jake's access. The reply came from Liz alone, claiming recurring guests with special needs posed liability risks and suggesting I meet Jake somewhere else. She even threw in a jab about how industrial accessibility features hurt the neighborhood's aesthetic and property values. I was floored by her outright discrimination, but tried to play nice. I invited her to meet Jake, hoping she'd see him as a person, not a problem. Big mistake. When Jake came over next, Liz didn't just show up, she brought 2 HOA board members with her. She talked about Jake like he wasn't right there, tossing around phrases like people like him and saying they needed to set a precedent before everyone started demanding accommodations. Jake, always cooler-headed than me, tried to explain that the ramp was his personal property, only used during VY sits. Liz cut him off. "It's not about you specifically. It's the precedent. Next, it'll be handrails, wider doors, special parking." Where does it end? One board member looked uneasy but stayed quiet. The other, a guy named Tom, nodded like Liz was preaching gospel. Before Leah VYing, she slapped me with another notice, this time a due Law 200 fine. Things spiraled from there. Every time Jake VY cited, Liz was there, snapping photos with her phone. She started calling the non-emergency police line, claiming suspicious active VY tie at my address. The first time cops showed up, they were baffled and left after I explained. Liz then rallied neighbors to report my unauthorized guest. Some tipped me off about her smear campaign. Others started avoiding me like I was trouble. The breaking point came when Liz somehow got Jake's work number and called his office, posing as a Willow Creek official with safety concerns about an employee entering a restricted community. Thank God Jake's boss saw through it and told him instead of buying her lies. But that was it for me. This wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. I reached out to a disability rights lawyer named Sarah Bennett, who was appalled. This isn't just cruel, she said. It's illegal. The Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act protect your right to have disabled guests. Liz's actions are harassment and discrimination, plain and simple. Sarah took my case and sent a cease and desist letter to Liz and the HOA board. 2 days later, I found a document on my door printed on what looked like HOA letterhead, but with off formatting. It declared Jake banned from Willow Creek without prior approval due to security and liability concerns, threatening legal action and even EVY tie-in if I didn't comply. It was signed Elizabeth Harper, President, Willow Creek HOA, with a fake official seal. I sent a photo to Sarah, who called me instantly. "This is beyond harassment," she said, her voice sharp. "She's impersonating authority and making illegal threats. This is fraudulent." Sarah contacted the other HOA board members, bypassing Liz. 2 claimed they knew nothing about the ban and seemed stunned. 1 admitted Liz ran most board decisions solo, without votes. Sarah filed complaints with the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Justice, citing violations of federal laws and fraud. I kept documenting everything, installing a doorbell camera that caught Liz photographing my house and Leah VYing notices. 1 clip showed her confronting Jake alone when I was late getting home, blocking his path to my door and calling him a trespasser and an eyesore. Jake stayed calm, saying he was in VY Ted guest, but Liz snapped, "People like you are why we have these rules. You're a liability." That VY Deo was gold. Sarah submitted it, and within days, HUD launched a full investigation. HUD investigators interviewed me, Jake, and other residents, uncovering a pattern. Liz had targeted elderly folks with mobility aids, families with special needs, kids, anyone she deemed undesirable, all under the guise of standards. 3 weeks later, Liz got notice of the investigation. Instead of backing off, she called an emergency HOA meeting, painting herself as a VY Tim and me as a troublemaker out to ruin Willow Creek. She even claimed Jake was faking his disability because she'd seen his legs twitch, utter nonsense, as his injury allows involuntary movement but no function. The final showdown came on a quiet evening when Jake was over for MOVYE night. A police cruiser and an unmarked car pulled up. My stomach dropped, thinking Liz had called another false report. But when I opened the door, 2 officers and a woman named Laura Kim from HUD CI VYL Rights DVY Shown greeted me. "We're here about the discrimination case," Officer Daniels said. "We need to speak with Elizabeth Harper." I pointed to Liz's house across the street. From my porch, Jake and I watched as Liz answered her door, her face morphing from confusion to rage as they identified themselves. Her voice echoed, demanding to know who was spreading lies. When Officer Daniels explained she was under investigation for CIVYL rights violations, discrimination, harassment, and fraud, Liz lost it. "I'm an official," she shrieked. "I'm the HOA president, and I have every right to enforce our rules. That man has no business here." She pointed at Jake. Laura Kim tried explaining federal protections, but Liz kept interrupting, insisting private communities were above the law. Things took a wild turn when Liz tried to slam her door on them. Officer Daniels stopped her, saying they had a warrant for her fraudulent documents. Then Liz did the unthinkable. She tried to shove past the officers, yelling that she'd end this nonsense, and charging toward my house. Officer Daniels blocked her, warning she was interfering with a federal investigation. When Liz kept pushing, they arrested her not just for discrimination, but for assaulting an officer and obstruction. As they cuffed her, Liz screamed about protecting property values and how I'd ruin the neighborhood. Neighbors gathered, But instead of defending her, many looked relieved. One older guy even flashed me a thumbs up. Liz's downfall was swift. She faced charges for housing discrimination, harassment, fraud, impersonation, and interfering with a federal probe carrying up to 5 years in prison and fines overdue law $300,000. Her bail was due law $50,000, forcing her to drain her SAVY according to Tom, who spilled the tea to everyone. At her arraignment, the judge shut down her lawyer's motion to dismiss, saying, "Ignorance of civil rights law is no excuse, especially after repeated warnings." Liz's face went pale as she glanced at me and Jake, not with her usual sneer, but with shock, like she couldn't believe her actions had consequences. That moment changed Willow Creek forever. The HOA was restructured, and the neighborhood felt lighter, freer. Jake and I still have our MOVY nights, and nobody bats an eye. Standing up to Liz wasn't easy, but it showed me the power of knowing your rights and fighting for what's right. So what do you think? Was Liz just a control freak protecting her turf? Or was she a straight-up discriminator who got what she deserved? Should HOAs have the power to control who VY sits your home? Or is that a step too far? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if this story fired you up, and subscribe for more real-life drama. Let's get this convo going.